From an off-road version of the Dodge Caravan to a Plymouth that could literally split into two. In this video, we're taking a look at the 10 rarest American minivans ever built. Starting off the list, we've got the 1935 Stout Scarab, often called the first minivan ever built. It was created by William Stout, an engineer who had already done just about everything. He worked in the car industry, aviation, journalism, and even helped create early commercial air travel. He was behind the Ford tri-motor airplane and pushed for all-metal aircraft when most planes still used wood and fabric. At some point, he looked at cars and thought, yeah, we can do better than this, so he built the Scarab. The design was inspired by the Scarab beetle, a symbol of renewal, which fits pretty well since this car tried to rethink everything. It had a rounded aluminum body mounted on a lightweight frame, more like an airplane than a typical car. It measured just over 16 feet long with a 135-inch wheelbase, and the biggest change came from the layout. The engine, an 85 horsepower Ford flathead V8, was mounted in the rear. That freed up space inside and gave passengers a lot more room to move around. And that space was actually used in a very different way. Inside, only the driver's seat stayed fixed. The rest could rotate up to 180 degrees so passengers could face each other. There was even a fold-down table in the middle, turning the cabin into something closer to a lounge than a car. On top of that, it had features like interior lighting, thermostat-controlled heat, a dust filtration system, and even power door locks, which, for the 1930s, sounds almost unreal. The exterior followed the same idea: integrated fenders, hidden hinges, flush glass, no running boards, and covered rear wheels. Everything was designed to improve airflow and efficiency. It even had independent suspension on all four wheels, giving it a smoother ride than most cars at the time. Performance was decent for what it was. It could reach 60 miles per hour in about 15 seconds and top out at around 80 miles per hour. Not built for speed, but clearly not struggling either. Stout believed in it enough to market it as a strong challenge to traditional car design. The plan was to build up to 100 units, each priced at $5,000, which is close to $120,000 today. That didn't go as planned. With the country still dealing with the Great Depression, very few people were ready to spend that kind of money on something this unconventional. In the end, only 9 Scarabs were built before World War II, and most went to company insiders. Today, only 5 are known to still exist. Stout even tried again after the war with a new version, but the price climbed even higher, and it never reached production. Next up is the 1981 Ford Aerovan. The Aerovan was designed by Ghia in Italy and built on the Ford Escort platform, which already tells you what the goal was: take a small, efficient car and stretch its practicality as far as possible. The result was something that could work as both a station wagon and a small van, depending on how you looked at it, and it could carry up to 7 passengers, which is pretty impressive considering its size. The dimensions keep things compact. It rode on a 94-inch wheelbase, measured 157 inches in length, 65 inches in width, and stood 63 inches tall. A big part of that came from its design. The Aerovan used what Ford described as a fast front shape, giving it a sloped nose that helped with aerodynamics and improved driver visibility. Underneath, it stuck with the Escort's platform and powertrain. The Aerovan even made a public appearance at the Canadian National Exhibition, and according to a Ford document from the time, it quickly turned into a surprise attraction. People kept stopping by, asking questions, trying to figure out what exactly they were looking at, and there was one question that kept coming up more than anything else. When is it going to be for sale? It was built as a concept, but like many vehicles like this, it never made it to production. Next on the list is the 1986 Pontiac Transport concept. Pontiac wasn't in the best spot during the late 70s and early 80s, with many people missing the performance image the brand used to have. Around that same time, minivans were starting to take off, so Pontiac decided to respond, but not in a typical way. The Transport sat low for a minivan and had a bubble-like shape. the windshield wrapped around like a helicopter canopy, and there was glass everywhere with no flat surfaces. It stood out immediately. Then there were the gull wing doors for the second row. They looked great and made getting in and out easier, which is not something you usually say about dramatic doors like that. The design kept going with large 17-inch aluminum wheels, low-profile Goodyear tires, and a two-tone exterior with silver lower cladding. Even the taillights were different, using 3 colors for different functions. Underneath, it used a space frame chassis with composite body panels inspired by the Fiero. Power came from a 2.9-liter V6 with 235 horsepower, paired with a 3-speed automatic and front-wheel drive. The gear selector was electronic and built into the armrest. Inside, it leaned heavily into the futuristic theme. Instead of regular gauges, it had a screen above the steering wheel, along with a head-up display. The passenger even got a built-in computer with a pop-up screen and keyboard, and the rear-view mirror was replaced by a display showing what was behind the vehicle. It seated 7 people and offered plenty of space, but clearly practicality wasn't the only goal here. There's even a theory that Pontiac already had the production version ready before showing this concept, using it to prepare people for the design. Either way, the idea worked. It led to the 1990 Transport, which helped Pontiac at the time. Next up is the 1987 Chevrolet Blazer XT1. First shown at the 1987 Chicago Auto Show, the XT1 had a very unusual design with its upper half almost entirely made of glass, giving it an open look that stood out right away. It was packed with off-road tech. It had an automatic 4-wheel drive system that could detect wheel slip and send power where it was needed, along with 3 differentials capable of shifting up to 80% of the torque to the axle with the most traction. The suspension was just as advanced, with long travel independent setup on all 4 wheels, allowing up to 10.5 inches of movement. The driver could even adjust the ride height, lowering it slightly for easier entry or raising it up to 4 inches for rough terrain. It even had 4-wheel steering, giving it a very tight turning radius for its size. Power came from a 4.3-liter V6 making 202 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed automatic. The interior featured around 30 onboard computers managing different systems, all shown on a single screen in front of the driver. By the late 80s, SUVs were getting popular and minivans were already everywhere. The XT1 tried to bring both ideas together into one package. Up next is the 1989 Plymouth Voyager III. This one might be the strangest idea on the list. At a time when people were starting to worry about fuel use and congestion but still wanted vans, Plymouth came up with a solution that tried to do both. The Voyager III was basically 2 vehicles in one. The front section was a small microcar for daily driving, seating 3 people, and planned to use a 1.5-liter engine, possibly running on alternative fuel. The rear was a van module with its own 2.2-liter turbo engine and automatic transmission. When combined, the whole setup could produce up to 250 horsepower and even run with all-wheel drive. The idea was simple. Use the small car in the city and attach it to the van when you needed more space. It was even designed to be modular, with the possibility of swapping the rear section for other setups. The version shown at the 1990 Detroit Auto Show could carry up to 8 passengers and included features like a rear camera, an overhead display, dual climate controls, and a stereo system with individual headphone jacks. But there were some obvious issues. If you detached the front section, the rear van was left wide open, so you couldn't just leave it outside. And building something like this would have been very expensive, especially for a vehicle that only really worked when both parts were together, so it never made it past the concept stage. At number 6, we've got the 1990 General Motors HX3. The HX3 was designed as a low-emissions alternative to the traditional family car, using a hybrid system that could switch between electric and gasoline power. Up front, electric motors drove the wheels using energy from a pack of 32 lead-acid batteries. When the charge got low, a small 3-cylinder engine would kick in and recharge them. So, in a way, it was already using ideas that would only become common years later. The design followed the same thinking. It had a tapered shape inspired by jet aircraft, helping it achieve a very low drag coefficient. The body featured flush glass, removable rear fender skirts, and a clean overall look focused on reducing resistance. Size-wise, it wasn't far off from a typical minivan, with a 120-inch wheelbase and an overall length of about 184 inches. Inside, it seated 5 passengers and was designed to feel more open and comfortable. Up next is the 1991 Dodge Caravan Off-Road. The idea came from designer Michael Santoro, who worked at Chrysler and became known for his minivan concepts. At one point, he decided to take the Dodge Caravan and give it a more rugged off-road style. And honestly, the changes weren't extreme. It got different wheels, side steps, a light bar, and brush guards. That was pretty much it. No wild redesign, no crazy engineering, just a tougher-looking version of a familiar minivan. But that was enough. The concept was well received by both management and Dodge dealers, and it actually made it all the way to a full-size prototype. It was even close to being shown at the Chicago Auto Show. Then everything stopped. According to Santoro, Jeep dealers weren't happy about it. They felt a rugged Caravan could take away from their own sales and pushed back hard enough to get the project canceled right before its debut. So what you're left with is a minivan that came incredibly close to production, built as a real prototype, and then shut down at the last moment. Next up is the 1991 Mercury Mystique. And no, this has nothing to do with the sedan that showed up a few years later. This was Mercury's take on a luxury minivan, mixing the practicality of a wagon with a more premium feel. It had an aluminum body, full-width headlights, and fiber optic taillights that gave it a very modern look for the time. Under the hood, it used something called a T-drive system. A V8 engine was paired with a centrally mounted transmission that could send power to the front wheels, rear wheels, or all four. So it could basically switch layouts depending on what was needed. Inside, it leaned heavily into comfort and tech. It had 6 individual bucket seats, and for the passengers in the back, each seat came with its own TV and VCR built into the seat backs. So everyone could watch their own thing, which probably would have saved a few arguments on long trips. And the glass roof used liquid crystal technology that could darken automatically in bright sunlight. Up next is the 1992 Dodge Epic. This one was Chrysler's early attempt at an all-electric minivan, long before that idea became common. Epic stood for Electric Power Interurban Commuter, and it was based on Chrysler's TE van program, which focused on testing electric vehicle technology. It ran on nickel-iron batteries and had a range of around 120 miles, which for the time was pretty remarkable. It had sliding doors on both sides, something that would later become standard on minivans. The rear hatch followed a tighter track along the body, making loading and unloading easier, and the rear seats could fold completely into the floor. Unlike most concepts on this list, this one actually led somewhere. A production version came out in 1997 and was leased to government and utility fleets. It used a higher voltage battery system and was built in Windsor, Ontario. Around 200 units ended up in use across the country. It even picked up a couple of wins at the Tour de Sol event in 2000, including its category and customer acceptability. All right, for the final car on the list, we've got the 2003 Dodge Kahuna. First shown at the 2003 Detroit Auto Show, the Kahuna was designed to be as functional as a minivan, but with a much more laid-back style. Think of it as a modern take on the classic surf wagon. The design made that clear right away. It had short overhangs, a bright blue finish called Point Break Blue, and real wood-style panels along the sides. It rode on massive 22-inch wheels, and the frameless windows could drop completely into the body, but the biggest feature was the roof. It used a retractable fabric setup that opened almost the entire top of the vehicle. It had seating for 6, with seats that could fold flat, be removed, or even turn into tables in the rear, so it could go from people carrier to hangout spot pretty quickly. Under the hood, it used a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with 215 horsepower, paired with a 4-speed automatic driving the front wheels. Nothing extreme, but enough to get the job done. There were even rumors that Chrysler was seriously considering putting it into production, but that didn't happen. The reaction at the time wasn't great, and the project was eventually canceled. The information in this video was gathered from the sources shown on screen. As always, you can find the sources in the Google Doc linked in the description. I recommend checking them out for more details. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check one of the recommended videos on the screen. One is about the rarest American wagons ever made, and the other covers what might be Ford's weirdest car ever. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one.